Well, the agenda this week saw a leopard change his spots, paid a visit to Station 11 and followed Ontario's trash trail. The agenda's week in review begins with Ontario's new PC leader.
You came out against the sale, the Liberals' proposed sale of 60% of Hydro One. An odd position, because Liberals are supposed to be those who want to keep public assets in the province's hands, and Conservatives are supposed to be the ones who want to privatize state assets. How come things have flipped?
Well, I said this in my comments this morning. I'm not against privatization. I think in some cases privatization has merits. In the case of Hydro One, I don't look at things strictly through partisan blinders, whether it's Liberal, NDP, or Conservative. I'm really going to try to look at every proposal. Does it benefit the province of Ontario? Last week, I complimented the Liberals on two different initiatives. I will compliment the Liberals if it makes sense for Ontario. But on the issue of the sale, I took a while to study it. I took a while to give my analysis. And what we kept on coming back to is this. We are losing majority control. This was founded in 1906 by Sir Adam Beck, and it was when they had the first demonstration of electricity in Ontario, they lit up a sign that it's for the people. Now we're losing that. This is a natural monopoly. People don't have a choice whether to use power or not. And when you lose majority control, here's the real problems that flows from that. We have no control over rate increases. And if there's
that's that's not going to be the case. The Ontario Energy Board is still going to be.
How often has the Ontario Energy Board turned down a rate increase? Once in a blue moon.
The size of the rate increase they have turned down frequently.
Once in a blue moon. The reality is it's based on cost, and that's how the rate increases are judged. And whether it is a 13% or 11% increase, you're going to see the government lose control over rate increases. That is a fact. Secondly, this will be not based on what's in the best interest of Ontario. Say, for example, we need to build transmission lines in Northern Ontario to make a major mining project happen. What if there's a remote community that doesn't have, the business case doesn't actually add up? We can no longer make choices on energy based on what's in the best interest of Ontario. And so I'm very concerned that we lose that ability. But additionally, what I think all Ontarians should be concerned about is oversight. It was historic when the 8 independent officers of Parliament issued a letter saying that they were concerned about losing oversight.
This is the
over
Environment Commissioner, the Ombudsman, the Privacy Commissioner,
Never before
and on
have
and
they
on.
all wrote a letter together and saying we are losing oversight. If you look at the Ombudsman report, there was 10,000 complaints into Hydro One. And here's the real concern. We are not losing oversight when this becomes a private company. We're losing oversight the day that the budget passes. To have no oversight, despite the fact we've seen some of the most egregious examples of mismanagement in Hydro One, this should be alarming. This should be alarming, and that's why I'm leading the charge against this deal, because it's a bad deal for Ontario. And it's not about what is an ideology. People say Conservatives should be for every privatization. Liberals should be against every privatization. I don't believe in ideological compartments. I told that to you 2 months ago on this show. I believe that as a pragmatic Conservative, our governing mantra should always be, what is in the best interest of this province? This is a bad deal. This is not in the best interest of Ontario.
I don't mind losing columns and TV staff. I pretty much expected most of that, not all of it. The attacks, though, have gone too far.
What kind of attacks?
Trolling my children's Facebook pages, accusing me of being unfaithful to my wife, accusing my eldest daughter of being gay. In that Lucy lives with her boyfriend in Paris and works in theatre, being gay would probably be an advantage, frankly. But, she's not. But it's meant to be, this is why he did it, saying that I'm gay, my gay lover was threatening to out me, that I'm bipolar, which shouldn't be an accusation, by the way, but it is, that I've had a stroke. Look, 1 or 2 people in the basement, that doesn't matter. I'm speaking of a lot of people saying this. An editor of a newspaper received 10 separate phone calls and emails saying, you should know Michael Corran is having an affair. I'm way too ugly to have an affair, Steve.
But do you think there's some kind of orchestrated conspiracy to, practice the politics of personal destruction against you?
No, I wouldn't use conspiracy. That sounds that's over the top. But there's definitely a campaign. I think people don't change their views. I think we've rather reduced and minimized public discourse where views have to remain static. And why? We evolve. We're all on a pilgrimage. We get older. We have a different life experience. I'll always be a Tottenham supporter. I could never support Arsenal. Some things are impossible, as you would know, to grasp. But I don't know. I can't answer that question. Maybe there is a certain perception. I would think, though, anyone with a strong opinion in public life who changed their mind on an issue that as controversial or personal or emotive as marriage equality, I think that would probably provoke a strong reaction.
Well, I'm guessing here, but the difference is that, you remember the famous line by John Maynard Keynes, when the facts change, I change my views, what do you do, sir? The facts haven't changed on marriage. I mean,
I have.
You have,
yeah.
Right. And I guess people from your former avocation don't like the fact that, as far as they're concerned, the facts haven't changed. It's you who have changed. Have you been embraced by more progressive elements as you have lost some of the support that you used to have among social conservatives?
Well, I don't have people from, I don't know, the CBC or Toronto Star coming to me saying, we demand that you do a show for us, nothing like that. I have experienced the most incredible grace and forgiveness from many members of the gay community. I thought there'd be a bit of, well, you've left it too long. I wouldn't really care. But no, I mean, overwhelmingly, invariably, it's been quite lovely. Yes, it is I who have changed. There are many Christians, many Christians, including conservative Christians, who've written to me to say, I fully understand, I'm with you, but for those other people, they can ignore me, perhaps be a bit angry with me. What I don't understand is the anger. It's not a betrayal to move this position. An anger at someone who is still a very devout Christian, who merely thinks that the public face of love and the devotion of two people from whatever background, whatever sexuality, to one another, that is God at work. That two people who have decided to spend their lives together, to die together, to look after one another in old age, that cannot be something which is ungodly. That has to be of God. I know all the arguments. I wrote a lot of them. I understand the sacramental nature. I understand the natural law and procreative nature of the argument. But I reject it now. It is not... Why is that so incredibly revolutionary? It doesn't make me a hero, but it doesn't make me a devil either.
People generally aren't going to vote on platforms about the Senate or about this or that. Exactly. They're going to vote on whose values are closest to mine and how can we get rid of the government in office. And at the moment, I have to say, as I travel around the country, my ear a little bit now to the ground, I'm hearing an awful lot of people asking me, does that guy Trudeau have it? They're not asking that about Mulcair. They're asking it about Trudeau. The Liberals were the natural fallback position for most of the anti-Trudeau, anti-conservative crowd for a long time. They are not anymore.
In our remaining few minutes here, let me put one more issue on the table, and it may well be the most controversial decision Justin Trudeau made in the lead up to this fall election, and that is his decision not to oppose C-51, the anti-terrorism bill. He said, we're getting close to an election. I don't want the Conservatives to be able to demonize me on this, and therefore we'll go along to get along for now. If we win, we'll change it. Michael, I want your view on the advisability of that decision.
It was a mistake. It was a mistake. I mean, the rationale was, we know it's going to pass anyway. Why should we vote against it and allow them to club us over the head with the accusation that we're soft on terror and, conventional hug-a-thug liberals, right? That's what they were trying to avoid. And tactically, it made sense. But over time, it's clearly emerged that the cleverness of it, the too cuteness of it, I think really hurt them in the sense that it made them look like, and made him look like he was trying to be too clever by half and not apply principle, which Mulcair really took advantage of.
Tom Mulcair came out clearly in opposition to it, and in fact, a New Democrat, Brooke, tweeted the following. This New Democrat said, Senior Trudeau brought Charter of Rights, and Junior is helping Harper to destroy it. You think that carries some weight?
Well, I think it was a mistake not to have opposed it. I have to say that. And he gave the speech in Toronto, and that was obviously supposed to be the way to get around that, but I think politically it was a mistake. I certainly don't think it was fatal, but it's clear, you know, Mr. Mulcair opposed it. It didn't cost him votes in Quebec. And I think this has got to do with the scripting issue. It would have been Trudeau's personal preference to oppose it. So they should have done so, and I can't deny that. On the other hand, I think, just to get back to what Jeffrey said, they are still asking in the country the question, is Trudeau up to it? They're not asking if Mulcair is up to it, and that's because the Liberals remain the first fallback choice. People instinctively aren't going to vote NDP if they think they can trust the Liberals. And at the end of the day, with 65% of the country determined not to vote for the Conservatives, he's right, platform doesn't matter, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of other things about the cabinet and the position on the Senate don't matter. It's who you trust. And I think the Liberals and the Liberal brand and Justin Trudeau still have a good chance of becoming the party that people trust.
Well, Brooke, it's possible they're not asking it about Tom Mulcair because they know he's up to it. He's been a provincial cabinet minister. He looks like he has gravitas. He doesn't have to pass that test.
A lot of people don't even know who Tom Mulcair is. You know, there are a lot of other polls which suggest that he's a real unknown to many Canadians still, which is why he's trying so hard to become better known and using this huge communications blitz.
Jeffrey, how do you think, Jeffrey, the decision on C-51 plays out in the mix?
I don't think people. I wish people followed public issues as closely as others do, but I don't think at the end of the day it's a crippler. I think what it did among people who followed it in general was to suggest that Mr. Trudeau was doing this for tactical reasons. I mean, Brooks said he didn't really believe it. I don't know that, but if he didn't really believe it, why did he do what he did? So he tries. If you do that, and you're a new face in the political world, and you're trying to seem fresh and not cynical like the old gang, but then you actually do something that's cynical, it doesn't help you. I think there's three, very briefly, storylines, and we haven't talked about the Conservatives, but with all the huge advantages the Conservatives have had for the last 6 months, and boy, they've lined their ducks up very well. They haven't gone anywhere in public opinion. The Liberals, on the other hand, have been in serial decline for a year. There's not something in the last couple of months. And the NDP has been in serial rise to the point where they are now leading or will be leading in some polls, which, as I said before, changes the dynamic quite a lot in Canadian politics. And we shall see whether Mr. Mulcair can reassure Canadians against the scare campaign that will be launched by the Conservatives and the Liberals, by the way, against the NDP's past and against its possible present. And we won't know that until the attacks begin and he responds.
I should ask you about what you think the state of contemporary political parties is. What's your view on that?
My view is that political parties are deservedly have lost allure, have lost attractiveness. They are no longer the natural home for idealists, for people that want to change the world, their city, their country. And that is a tragedy. And because you cannot have democracy without political parties. And since the end of the Cold War beginning in 1990s, if you will, political parties have had a terrible run. And NGOs, non-governmental organizations, or movements, or social activists have had a great run. So if you are a young, idealist, energetic individual who wants to make change for the good, you don't join a political party. You are most likely to join a non-governmental organization or a movement of some kinds and so on. And that needs to change. Not that we don't need the NGOs and the movements, but we need stronger, more attractive, more modern political parties. People don't go to political parties because they believe very often correctly that political parties are oligarchic, they are exclusionary, they only attract careerists, people that care more about their own career and use political parties just as a step to go into government and not because driven by the will to do better or to do good. And And so we need, it's very important that political parties begin to regain the ability to attract the idealists. And if those that already exist cannot change, then others should come and provide that.
Those other groups you mentioned, though, have a lot of very faithful adherents behind them. The Republican Party, the Democratic Party, I suspect a lot of Conservatives, Liberals, New Democrats, and Greens in Canada have lost the faith. So how do we get it back?
Well, by innovation. I do believe that we are at the doors of a wave of political innovation. If you think about how we live today, you know, since we wake up in the morning to when we go to bed at night, there is all kinds of things that have transformed our life, the way we communicate, the way, you know, our health is, you know, innovation in about everything has disrupted businesses, institutional functioning. It has created new opportunities. So innovation is around. The human condition is being transformed by innovation in almost everything, except the way we govern ourselves. The way we pick our leaders, the way we monitor our governments, the way we participate in collective decision-making, in politics. So innovation across the board, in everything except in the way we govern ourselves. And that has to change. That will change, because I think there is a wave of political innovation and governing innovation that it's about to hit us.
Southern Ontario Gothic, what is it?
Well, Timothy Findlay, in an interview in 1973, may have been the first person published to use the term Southern Ontario Gothic, and he used it in comparing it to a genre in the United States called Southern Gothic, which was a genre that wedded literary realism to feelings of terror, and did so by focusing on things like mental illness, violence, family dysfunctions, racial tension, decrepitude, all of these themes that were very popular in the southern US. And because there was a tendency among Southern Ontario writers to write similarly, this subgenre, Southern Ontario Gothic, came into being.
How far back do you think it goes?
The genre itself?
In Ontario.
I would take it all the way back to the very first novel from Southern Ontario, Wakusta, from 1832 by John Richardson, which is a very typically and conventionally Gothic novel that describes a man, a European, who goes wild and lives with the natives and dresses himself up in war paint, and he's very frightening, and he abducts the heroine, the maiden, and so forth. And it's a really melodramatic, lurid tale.
And how, Michael, did this genre develop in the province of Ontario?
Oh, now there's another good question for Monica. Steve, you know, with Graham Gibson's wise remarks ringing in my ears about the impossibility of making generalizations about writers, cats who will not and should not be herded, I'll begin by saying Southern Ontario Gothic is a phrase I'm loath to define, but I'm happy to explore and hopefully to map, and in the spirit perhaps of the storytellers themselves, whose job description includes playing with words, creatively, exuberantly, and in a way that sort of maps the fears and desires and the perspectives of their society, like it or not. Northrop Frye suggests that there's an imaginative continuum in the locale, sort of shared sense of this place as a distinct regional, even mythological country. And besides Gibson and Atwood, who had their toes on the starting line early on, and of course James Rainey, another delightful master of this genre, Alice Munro is another exquisite map maker. Let me tell you, she has a character called Dell in the 1971 Lives of Girls and Women. This is Dell's take on her neighbors. People's lives in Jubilee, small town she's from, wickedly ironic name. People's lives in Jubilee are dull, simple, amazing, unfathomable. Deep caves paved with kitchen linoleum. And you know what's in those caves, Steve?
Tell me.
The paradox that is you, me, these folks, and I guess all of us. There we
Cool.
are, in all our light and glory, all our shadow, our terrible potential for damage, destruction, duplicity. What Munro calls in another story, the other side of dailiness.
You know, for a guy who doesn't really want to define what this is, you just did a pretty darn good job of doing just that.
That's Southern Ontario Gothic, doubleness, contradiction, paradox.
Well, here's something you got me thinking about. Normally, you know, you go to the shopping mall or buy groceries, you've got all those supermarket tabloids that are at the checkout counter. And I suppose, like a few people, I kind of turn my nose up at these and think they're kind of ridiculous. But in your story, they become actually quite central in a constructive way to the whole plot. And I wonder if you're trying to tell us something. Are you trying to tell us these magazines are more useful and have more value than perhaps we give them credit for?
Absolutely not. No, I was interested in writing about celebrity culture because it's an aspect of our current world that I find utterly fascinating and bizarre. We stand there in the checkout line. We see the supermarket tabloids and magazines, and it's the same recurring cast of characters every week. That pool can't be larger than 20 or 30 people who we just encounter again and again and again, the births and deaths and divorces and drama. And we almost begin to see them as fictional characters. It's almost the equivalent of a soap opera to us. I think we almost forget that they're real people. I was interested in writing about that, the strange and, I would have to assume, somewhat corrosive effect of living your life under that kind of scrutiny. So as I was setting out to write the character of Arthur, the actor who dies of a heart attack in the first chapter, I was thinking about how fame might warp his approach to his art. That when he first sets out, it's all about the art itself. It's all about acting. But as he keeps on going, as he does become famous, he is under this extraordinary scrutiny. And what that might do to a person was something I was interested in writing about. And then also, another thing that interested me was the absolute randomness of what survives or doesn't from any given historical period. So you hope, of course, that the Shakespeare will survive and the Beethoven symphonies. But what might also survive are the supermarket tabloids. So that was interesting to me to think about.
Let's talk a bit about pop culture and dystopian stories right now. It is a very, very hot genre. I don't have to tell you about The Walking Dead. I guess it's the one of the most watched shows, if not the most watched show in cable television history. Do you have any theories as to why this particular genre is so hot right now?
I do. I've been on tour pretty extensively for Station 11. I actually just did my 57th event for the book, which is kind of unbelievable. I get asked at almost every stop about my theories on this topic, and people have told me their theories, some of which are quite interesting. I'll run through a couple of them for you. The one that I hear the most frequently is that our interest in this dystopian or post-apocalyptic literature has to do with the anxiety we feel at this somewhat fraught time in which we find ourselves, the climate change, political instability, etc. The counter-argument to that is that, as far as I can tell, we've always thought the world was ending. You know, you think about the moments in even just the 20th century that would have seemed absolutely catastrophic, the First and the Second World Wars, the Spanish flu, etc. But then what's more interesting is you consider the times that would seem to have been quite tranquil, at least in retrospect. And even in those times, we had this pessimism. My mother once mentioned to me that she and her friends felt quite guilty about bringing children into the world in the late 70s and early 80s in Western Canada. I mean, try to imagine a more tranquil time or place. But of course, that was the height of the Cold War. They were worried about nuclear annihilation. So my point is just that it seems that we always think the world is ending. Another theory I've heard, which I found interesting, is that our interest in these narratives has to do with economic inequality. That there's a part of us that likes the idea of a scenario where everything falls apart and we get to start over from scratch on equal footing. Another theory, which is so depressingly banal that I almost can't think about it, is that it's because all of our parents are divorced. So we saw before and after, we saw the world completely change. The theory that resonates the most for me, which I heard from a bookseller in the UK, is that we're drawn to these narratives about the future because there are no more frontiers. The idea being that there was a time, really for almost all of human history, when it was possible to go somewhere and start your life all over again on a frontier. in Canada or the US or Australia. And that's no longer really a possibility. We've mapped every inch of the world that's above sea level. There's really nowhere else you can go. And so her idea, which I love and find fascinating, was that in the absence of the frontier, we're turning toward the future. And that's our new sort of frontier that we're drawn toward. So that's the idea that I like the most of all of them. I think it's the most interesting.
This is province-wide what Ontario generates, everything from households, businesses, institution, industrial, in terms of waste. 12 million tons each and every year. 9 million of that goes to landfill. Remaining 3 million is diverted. Now, here's how it breaks down between what we do at our homes and elsewhere. 40% of that waste goes through from the residential and municipal stream, 60% from industrial, commercial, and institutional. Let's talk about diversion. This is data from 2013. Of what municipalities collect, 47% is what is diverted. That number hasn't really changed over the years. The year previous, 2012, was about the same. The best city, the honor goes to the city of Guelph, 69%. Our biggest city in this province, Toronto, 53%. Now, all that waste coming from industrial, commercial, and the institutional sector, 13% of that is being diverted. That comes courtesy of the Government of Ontario data there. All right, Maria, start with you. How do those numbers begin to paint a picture of Ontario's waste profile? What should we read into those?
I think we should read in that on the residential side, we're doing all kinds of great things, but that there's work to be done on the institutional, commercial, industrial waste side. They have two different systems that manage these different wastes. You've heard already about the residential side, and the industrial, commercial, institutional side is a very diverse sector. It's managed mostly by the private sector. We have all kinds of issues that affect how much we divert and how much we dispose, including fairly inexpensive landfill disposal in Michigan and New York State. About 3 million tons of our waste in Ontario is in fact not disposed in Ontario, it's disposed in the US. So the fact that we have inexpensive landfill makes recycling and composting and all these other great diversion technologies less financially attractive if you're always just looking at the cheapest option.
Okay, we're going to talk about many of the things that you brought up there, but let me come to you, Peter. You know those numbers very well. What are you reading into them?
I think we have fundamentally a structure that's not sustainable. So we have an economy that takes an approach of take, make, and dispose, and we can't continue down that same path. So our association specifically has been looking at it and saying, how can we change those dynamics? How can we try to move to a system where we drive value from our waste stream, that we try to create some circularity within our economy, so that we do have a sustainable framework moving forward.
Joanne, in the 80s, blue bins, Ontario, we were world leaders. Hey, look at these amazing things, these blue bins. How has the profile of Ontario's waste changed in those more than 30 years? Are we still throwing out the same kind of stuff?
No, certainly we know that the packaging and the products that are now brought into the marketplace are very dynamic, and unfortunately it's not always in products that are actually recyclable, or they're tougher to recycle, and maybe as Peter said earlier, the value of those materials just aren't there for the commodity markets, for the recyclers to actually bother to make an effort to collect. So our successes in the municipalities or in the residential side is really as a result of our great municipalities who have invested in good infrastructure, invested in 40 years of programming, and we just don't have that same level of commitment and resources and information for the businesses and commercial side of Ontario, and that's because it is privately building by building serviced, and the dynamics economically are quite different.
Ontario, we're not so great at this, but put us into context. Worldwide, how do we do?
I'd say maybe a B+ residentially, and residentially it's quite different between single-family dwellings in more of the municipalities versus multi-unit residences. All those condos, they're not recycling nearly at the level of our households. Where we work and where we go to school and where we shop, we're doing very badly. Arguably, C- would be charitable, I think. And it's a bit ironic because the industrial, commercial, shopping malls, this sort of thing, is actually sometimes easier to get that waste diverted because you can use economic instruments. If you have a differential pricing for a tipping fee, you say, okay, you got mixed garbage, you're sending it to landfill, the price is higher, you recycle, the price is lower, you can make that happen much more quickly. But we haven't done that. We're still building condominiums with only one garbage chute, those sorts of things where we haven't made those adjustments yet.
Okay, with your generosity, you've given us a C-. Who's getting an A or an A+? Where do you look?
Many of the Scandinavian countries are doing fairly well. Japan, some of the Latin American cities, particularly Brazil. Buenos Aires is doing much better. India has some very good collection programs. Where they're falling apart to some extent is on the disposal.
Here's the thing about waste. Garbage, to use that term very loosely. Let's stick with waste so I get it right. I say waste to you, or I say garbage to you, most people are going to say municipality, municipal responsibility. And what I'm hearing from the four of you is like, obviously, yes, who comes to your curb and gets your stuff is run by the municipality, but we have a misunderstanding of waste in this province.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the municipality is definitely responsible for residential waste, but when it comes to business waste, it's really the private sector who manages the business waste, and the private sector responds to what the waste generator asks for, and what the waste generator asks for in terms of service depends on whether they want to recycle, whether they want to compost, whether they've got space, whether they've got staff that are trained up to do it right, and on and on and on. So
do we get it wrong then Peter? I mean, it's ad hoc. It's private businesses, private industries deciding. Do we need something more of an umbrella?
So I think when you look at the system right now, I mean, people are acting rationally based on the current market conditions. The problem is that the market conditions aren't incenting the type of behaviors that are the things we need to for our economy to progress and flourish. So we need to change those dynamics so that our economy can flourish as a result of that.
Okay, you on side with that?
Yeah, I just wanted to pile on, I guess, to the point that you're making. And I think right now in the commercial sector and in our where we work and where we play and go to school, we're relying on the markets to pull those materials out by way of their value, unless that specific building asks for specific kind of treatment. I think what we're needing is a policy push, a framework, a regulation that actually starts to drive the right market stimulus that we're all looking for to make those discards a commodity.
What about goodwill?
Absolutely goodwill, and I think we've relied on the municipalities for far too long. You're absolutely right, and there are different policy approaches that can be taken. We can change the economics overnight by having a disposal levy, by way of an example, just immediately with a blunt instrument making disposal or your discards more expensive than the recycling markets, and that's one blunt policy way of actually changing the market dynamics.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review, and you can see all of those programs in their entirety on our website, theagenda.tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, and on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.